Attention, armchair quarterbacks and shower thought GMs. It's time for this week's episode of SportsBall with Mike Maharrey and Alan Mosley. Always love this music.
From the moment that I said the Cowboys season is over, they've gone undefeated.
So much for your prognostication.
Yeah, I know. So much for Dak Prescott.
Right?
Drama. Welcome back to Sportsball, everybody. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined as always by Tampa Bay sports superfan Mike. The song ended.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah.
It's Mike Maharrey.
I like the music. What can I say?
Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. We're hanging in there.
Yeah, I know. You guys got some weather heading your way. Is everything going to be all right?
Well, yeah, I think so. It's the amount of work that goes into preparing for a storm is insane. But it was the excuse we needed to clean out our garage because we're trying to get cars in.
Well, in case there's any cleanup to do, Mike, I've got 100,000 volunteers heading your way.
Oh, good.
It's only like twice in 18 years. Let us have this, Mike.
Right.
Although I think it's going to be a little bit more often in the near future.
Let's go!
Don't worry. Wait for the camera rotation, then we'll turn it off. I know your ears are bleeding. As much as I love that atmosphere, Mike Maharrey, and I know it pains you to see it because your Florida Gators just dropped a heartbreaker to the Tennessee Vols. However, wouldn't you love to be like an 18, 19-year-old kid who like just missed a chip shot field goal and have 100,000 people ask you to visit euthanasia.com?
Oh, painful. I listened to a sports podcast. It's a sports reporter from here in the Tampa Bay area, and he was there. I think it was 2016. And he said that stadium was the loudest that he's ever heard human beings.
Yes. It's weird to be sitting in that bowl and looking around and saying, so this is what 100,000 people look like.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Now you know. Speaking of that, we're going to start off the show the way we always do, which is with some shit announcers said this past week.
Constantly spanking him.
You do know that my feet aren't without hair.
Oh,
they grow
good.
very well down there. Just not on my face.
It's really weird.
Yeah, it is.
It was weird that you would just bring that up. Not saying it's TMI, but I think we have an opportunity. You've got your pedicure with Tebow. Why don't you take off your shoes, show the people?
Well, no, I'm not going to do that, Tom, because I actually started an OnlyFans, and I'm going to be selling subscriptions to that thanks to SEC Nation today and some interesting close-up shots of my feet.
That'll pay for your pool.
I'm an entrepreneur. What can I say? You know.
Constantly spanking him.
7-11, you know what they're hoping? That defense is open right now. They're saying this defense is always open. Let's see if we can drive it in.
You are on fire today.
Oh, well, you know.
You're on fire.
Yeah, everybody gets a Slurpee on the sideline.
Constantly spanking him.
Ayuk comes inside of him.
Constantly spanking him.
What they're talking about here in terms of what do? Do you throw your challenge flag? The play flag. The play clock is running. Get challenge flag. The play flag. The play clock is running. Get challenge flag.
Constantly spanking him.
I think Mike Tirico just said the no-no word, so that's the end of his career, isn't it?
He's done. You know, he thinks he's white.
You've told me that now on a number of occasions, but please elaborate here today on SportsBall.
There's nothing to elaborate. The man thinks he's white. We always imagine, you know, because he's often on the desk with Tony Dungy, or we often imagine that, you know, Tony's like looking at him, dude, you black.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
All right. Well, on that note, this week we have an Adventures in Officiating that, let me tell you, let me set the stage here. This isn't just a controversial call that you and I may or may not debate.
Right.
This is genuinely an adventure in officiating.
No.
Take it away.
Adventures in Officiating.
I want you to pay close attention right here. First down from just past midfield. Washington State has the ball. Quarterback's in trouble. He panics, tries to throw it away. Oh, there's not a receiver in the area, Mike. That's intentional grounding. But wait just a minute. That was first down. Okay, intentional grounding. It's a sack at the spot of the throw and a loss of down. So we're going to second down and long, right?
Right.
But pay attention to the bottom of the screen. It's suddenly 3rd and 16. Now, no, we didn't fast forward the clip. They actually went from first to third. They decided to go for a chippy little inside dry handoff and then punt the ball away. That's a little bit of cowardly coaching. But we're not going to go there for right now. They punt the ball to Oregon on 4th and long. We go to a commercial break. We're moving on.
Right.
After the commercial break, the referees come back on the field to let the audience know we forgot about second down. So the way that we're going to fix this is we're going to give the ball back to Washington State and basically replay third down. Let them play third down over again and then go from there. Now, ultimately, what ends up happening is that Washington State essentially elects to go with basically the exact same play. They're going to do a cheeky little inside handoff here for minimal gain and end up punting the ball back anyway. But just to confirm, the rule is that once the ball is snapped, you can't go back, right? In terms of replay, whatever.
Right.
So not only did they go backwards 2 plays, which is unprecedented, but they still didn't get it right, because if they lost a down and they already ran a third down where they picked up 5 or 6 yards on a draw and punted, shouldn't they get to keep those 5 or 6 yards and then have another down?
I'm so confused by this, I can't even answer the question.
So ultimately what ended up happening is the referees forgot about second down, had them go straight to third down. They run their third down play, then run their fourth down play. Then on 1st and 10 for Oregon, they hit the time machine, go back to third down for Washington State where the ball was. But again, not only did they go backwards multiple plays, and not only did they do that because they forgot that there's 4 downs instead of 3, but in their attempt to quote-unquote get it right, they just had them replay the third down as if kind of like there's offsetting penalties, as opposed to them actually having another down. Because having another down would mean they get to keep the results of their other third down and then have another third down, because that's 4 downs.
Ooh.
So they still technically only got to have 3 downs. They just got to play one of the downs over again.
That is the ultimate adventure in officiating.
On a totally random side note, could you imagine the Pandora's box that would open if they decided from this point forward, hey, if we didn't get something right, let's just go back to when it was and do it all over again?
It's almost like the federal government and the Constitution.
Imagine how upset Oregon would be if, say, they ran that punt for a touchdown the first time.
Right.
I don't know.
That's insane.
Just saying.
Well, speaking of insane, I've got a puck to the head for you. So I think I'm going to step on some toes this week because I'm shooting a puck at Michael Kessler. Now, as you can see, you can't really tell who he is, but he's actually the dude who ended up coming away. There he is. Yes.
Yeah. Get out of there, Mike.
There he goes. He came away with Aaron Judge's 60th home run ball, so that tied him with Hank Aaron for a single season home run record. Came out of the scrum with the ball. Now, do you know how much that ball is estimated to be worth?
Oh, tell me.
$50,000. That's and possibly more than that. Now, do you know what he did with that ball?
Hopefully he sold it for $50,000.
No, he just gave it back.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, he got some swag. Judge gave Kessler some signed baseballs. He got him a signed bat. He also got a photo and a group photo with him and his buddies. Now, look,
all right.
You know me. I'm generally the nice guy, right?
Sure.
And I know that this Michael was trying to be a nice guy. And everybody's praising the guy for being a nice guy. And he might legitimately be a nice guy, but you know what he actually is? He's a poor nice guy. Now, I get the idea that showing some kind of integrity to the game or some bullshit like that. But, it's not like these people don't have the resources to pay for what the ball's worth, right? It's not like
Correct.
he's saying, it's not like if you went to Aaron Judge, hey, dude, give me $50,000. It's not like Aaron Judge doesn't have $50,000, or for God's sake, the New York Yankees. It's not like he'd be
Correct.
taking money out from a baby money. No, candy from a baby or kicking puppies if he got compensation for the ball. So I'm giving him a puck to the head for staying poor. He's going to regret that someday, I think. But he does have a nice bat, so.
I feel like you should shoot a bonus puck to all the different networks that were cutting in during college football games to show Aaron Judge going for a home run. If people wanted to watch crappy baseball, they'd be watching baseball. They're trying to watch football season here, fellas. All right.
Word.
Sorry. I had to.
I like
every
it.
network.
Supplemental
I couldn't
puck.
believe it. Yeah. Mike Kessler needs some supplemental
Yes, he does.
income right now.
He needs some supplemental
All right.
cash.
It's time for this season's very first. I can do that.
Oh, awesome.
Check this out. This is the punter from South Florida. Oh no, he fumbles. What? Wait, hold on a second. He fumbles the snap from the long snapper and then decides he's with the rushers coming in from Louisville. I don't have time to pick up the ball and get the punt off. I'll just punt it from the ground. Well, bad news, fellas. This is not Australia. You can't do that in the NFL. So kicking the ball off the ground is actually an illegal forward kick, which is not something you hear very often. Watch this. Look, no time, just kick it. Which it didn't even work anyway, right? He still hit a Louisville player with the ball. So the ball wasn't going to go anywhere regardless. But that is an illegal kick. Now, if you're wondering, how does this punter for a D1 college team make this kind of mistake? Well, you'll see here at the bottom of your screen, there's Andrew Stokes, who's 28 years old from Perth, Australia. He had never played American football. Oh, by the way, here's a supplemental. You've heard about the butt fumble, but have you heard about the butt punt? Boom! The personal protector for the Miami Dolphins late in the fourth quarter of the Dolphins-Buffalo Bills game. The butt punt, you're going to see a close-up of it right here. I bet this didn't feel too good. Check this out. Boom! You can actually see the ripple of the buttocks, Mike Maharrey. Check that out. Right there. So just launching the ball into the back of my own player, I could do that.
Well, and I could be the player getting my butt hit with the football. I could do that.
Well, there you go. Well, we're both good to go. We'll both suit up
right.
The next time we have to punt out of the back of the end zone. As a quick aside, by the way, the Dolphins did go on to win that game, but there was some discussion before the play of should the Dolphins call a timeout and maybe just take an intentional safety here versus lining up for the punt. Out kicking your coverage means good return or good field position for the Bills. Or it just gets returned for a touchdown. Either way, maybe taking an intentional punt, doing the free kick, and then setting up your defense would be better.
Yeah.
They decided to go with the punt, wound up with the safety anyway, so it's kind of like it didn't really matter, but it could have been way worse than it was. Considering that it was a butt punt that then practically rocketed straight up in the air and then curved backwards, it actually could have just landed in the end zone for a Buffalo Bills touchdown. They could have lost the game on the butt punt. Yeah.
Well, so normally we have cowardly coaches coaching cowardly, right? We don't have that today.
Plenty of those.
Yeah, plenty of those.
Yeah.
But every once in a while we get a brave coach coaching bravely. And I've got one for you today.
All right.
It's Billy Napier of the Florida Gators. Now, I know they lost. I know. And I know that makes you happy. Makes me sad.
It does.
But I still have to give Napier credit for some good, brave coaching. So the Gators were down, about 4:49 left in the game. They score a touchdown that pulls them within 11, right? So you would think that they would just go for that extra point, make it a 10-point game. They could then tie it with a touchdown and a field goal. But they didn't do that. They went for 2. They didn't get the 2. We'll set that aside. I still like the call because it was brave. Napier summed it up. He said, ultimately, the numbers are going to tell you to go for 2 at the end of the game anyway to win the game, right? Napier said, so you're really just declaring your path quicker, and that gives you a chance to adjust your strategy for the rest of the game. And what I really like is he actually said he didn't go to Tennessee to tie. He was going for the win. I like that he was going for the win because so many coaches, they'll just putz around and kick a field goal and try to make it respectable. No, he was going in there to win the game, and I can appreciate that. It didn't work, but I like it.
As a quick little aside here, I'm gonna hijack your segment here, Meharry, to give you a supplemental Brave coach.
Nice.
And we're also gonna stay with games between teams between the states of Tennessee and Florida.
Oh boy.
How about the Middle Tennessee State Blue Raiders getting paid $1.5 million to head down to South Beach to take on the Miami Hurricane and then blowing them out of the water?
Yes.
45-31 was the final score, and frankly, the game wasn't even that close. Let me read a couple of quick stats here for you from Coach Rick Stockstill, which, by the way, in the post-game interview, like normally you're really humble and saying, I'm proud of our kids,
right.
Hats off to Miami. He said, quote, it was a butt kicking from the very beginning.
Nice.
Ooh!
I like it.
Ooh. Let me read you a couple of stats from this game. You want to talk about brave coaching? They're a D1 school. MTSU's been to a few bowl games in recent years, so it's not like they've never played football before.
Right.
But you're still getting paid to go get a butt whooping from them, not the other way around. They had a 15-yard pick six, but here's the brave coaching. So you're deep on your own side of the 50. Right. Facing long down and distance. What do? How about 71-yard touchdown pass,
nice.
69-yard touchdown pass, and then from the back of your own end zone, 98-yard touchdown pass.
That's awesome.
So the MTSU Blue Raiders, even during parts of the game where they were holding on to a lead, decided, wait, we're backed up in our own side of the field? Hail Mary. Hail Mary was the call about every other play. How's this for Chris Cunningham, MTSU's quarterback? He had 408 yards on only 16 completions.
That's crazy. You know how bad a day it was for Miami?
How bad a day was it?
Their hockey team that same day lost to USF 11-0.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That is kind of bad. All right, one more quick little factoid before we take our first commercial break. So, speaking of it being bad for Florida, I'm sorry, this is the last I'm going to pick on the Gators.
Man.
For the last calendar year, Florida's men's baseball, basketball, and football are a combined 0-6 against the Tennessee Volunteers.
That should be my in memoriam.
I know, you love to see it, don't you? All right,
I don't. We're
going to be back with an extended edition of this week's Yay or Nay right after the commercial break. Don't go away. If you're enjoying this afternoon's episode of SportsBall, consider supporting the program by joining our Patreon over at patreon.com/Alan Mosley. Tune in to It's Too Late with Alan Mosley, Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern Time on your favorite video platform of choice. Just search Alan Mosley TV. Roll. You gotta do that. Nice roll. All right, guys, we're gonna do an extended yay or nay. Mike, I've got a yay or nay for you.
All right, I'm ready.
Setting the stage, a lot of people complain that in both college and professional sports, you have top-heavy leagues, a handful of teams that are just the runaway favorites year in and year out. In college, you might have perhaps Alabama, Georgia Bulldogs. Certainly last year, everyone was saying that going into this year. Same thing in the NFL. The Bills are the runaway Super Bowl favorites. If only they can overcome the Chiefs. Who's going to stop them? They've already blown out the Rams. The Buccaneers are getting old. Who's going to stop these runaway favorites? And yet, here we are only a few weeks into each league's respective seasons. Alabama barely survived a trip to play the Texas Longhorns, who Texas is not even looking very good. They just lost to Texas Tech.
Right.
They lost to Texas Tech worse than they lost to Alabama.
Indeed.
Georgia actually was in a game with about 7 minutes left to play in the fourth quarter with Kent State.
Who?
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I really hope the Alabama and Georgia teams that struggle in those games play UT in the next few weeks. Wouldn't that be great?
They probably won't.
Right. Anyway, and then take a look at the NFL.
Right.
The Buffalo Bills just losing to the suddenly powerful and mighty Miami Dolphins, as well as the Kansas City Chiefs. Boy, my worst pick of this past week. The Chiefs, who were on a roll, go in to play an Indianapolis team that just lost 24-0 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And frankly, they handled the Chiefs.
Yeah, and suddenly the Jags aren't Jags.
Suddenly, the Jags are running away with the division. Because it goes both ways. So not only are the teams at the top coming down, another thing for the NFL, we're only 3 weeks in, and we now only have 2 undefeated teams left, with the third, New York Giants, losing last Monday night to the Dallas Cowboys. So with all these teams at the top struggling and all these perennial bottom feeders having respectable seasons, is it still true, yay or nay, that the NFL and college football are top-heavy leagues?
It's a good question, because if you go with recency bias, you would say yes. You look back at the NFL season last year, there were clear, 4 or 5 teams. This year, not so much. I don't know what's going on with my throat. People have to forgive. So I'm going to go, but looking at this year, if you just look at the way things are playing, I'm going to go with nay. And I think there's a couple of reasons that, and maybe you might want to elaborate on this, but I think there are a couple of reasons that we're seeing less top-heavy leagues. I think in the pros, we've had a couple of seasons where we've had a little bit of a constriction on the salary caps. So that is forced, I think, a little bit of movement in players. And then in the college football realm, I think the transfer portal is really changing the landscape, where, you can have a team very quickly reverse fortunes by bringing in a few good transfers. And by the same token, you can have a powerful team. They're definitely losing depth, in college football. You don't have the superstar backup quarterback waiting in the wings anymore. They're transferred off to somewhere else. So I think it's becoming less top heavy. And I think we're seeing that impact this year.
I'm going to say a soft nay that they're not top-heavy leagues, at least not this year. But it's a soft nay because it kind of depends on, where do you draw the line between the top and the bottom?
Right.
So we'll start with college football. So I think your comments on the transfer portal make a lot of sense. We'll take the Tennessee Vols as a perfect example. When Jeremy Pruitt was shoved out the door, their impending NCAA investigation, 3-17, they barely won any conference games over the last couple of seasons. He absolutely destroyed the program. And he was, by the way, he was only the most recent one to absolutely throttle the program.
Right.
Josh Heupel comes in and wins games. Now, hats off to him for doing a great job at UT, but they're still missing 20, 30 scholarship players on the sidelines.
Yeah.
How are they able to do it other than having just throwing long every play like MTSU does?
Right.
The answer is the transfer portal. Hendon Hooker, who's suddenly a Heisman dark horse candidate, transfer portal.
Yeah.
They were able to fill a lot of gaps that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And you're right, vice versa. The Alabamas and Georgias of the world, which, by the way, are certainly not hurting for talent by any stretch of the imagination. But if they have a 4.5 star that would start for anyone else who's third in the rotation, he's going to go play somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So, and then we'll take it to the NFL. Again, we make it a big deal every single year that the 72 Dolphins every single year pop the champagne for when the final undefeated team loses.
Right.
We're only 3 weeks into the season, and it's almost time. We'll have to look it up for next week to see, will this be the quickest that there's no undefeated teams left in the NFL? But I'm still going to say a soft nay, because it doesn't matter how you start, it matters how you finish, right? So even though we might have more competitive schedules and records in the first, say, 6-8 weeks of the season, if it still comes down, if the next decade still comes down to the Broncos, Ravens, Patriots, Chiefs, Bills, Buccaneers, Rams, that's probably it. If it comes down to those teams, and those teams still win all the Super Bowls over the next decade, even if they lost a couple of more games to get there, or maybe you have a few more second or third seeded teams ultimately making it to the conference championship games, is that really that big of a difference? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I know as a big hockey guy, I'm sure you would strongly agree with the point that there's something slightly different about postseason play than there is regular season play.
Absolutely.
So maybe we hold off on determining where the league is until the games matter just a little bit more.
Yeah, that's fair. I still say that it increases your chances, even a slight ticking down, or I guess ticking up in parity is you're gonna see that start to play out in the results of the various games, because especially in the NFL, I mean, when you really get down to it, there's it seems like it when we watch, but in reality, there's not a huge difference between the worst and the best NFL team. So if you just shift that a little bit, then it bounces up pretty quickly. And again, looking at college, just the nature of it, you have more upsets because of the way college is and the maturity of the players and whatnot. So you can shift that, I think, with the addition of a few good players, where maybe it's not creating true parity. Maybe your Georgias and your Alabamas and your Clemsons are still going to dominate, but you have a better chance for an upset.
Exactly. And so again, my final point to drive home, it depends on where you draw the line. I think it might be true that the teams at the top are struggling more to hold on to those undefeated records. But if at the end of the season, the SEC or Big Ten champion wins the national championship over the next decade, the rest of college football will say it's still a pretty top-heavy league.
And, to play devil's advocate too, I mean, especially in college, you always see the top teams have that one clunker of a game where you're just like, this does not look like Alabama, or this does not look like Georgia, and maybe we were just seeing those early in the time period. You look at last year, you saw Green Bay, they just absolutely got pummeled the first game of the season, kind of like this year. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, Green Bay's done. And then, they're the cream of the crop in the NFC when it's all said and done. So maybe we revisit this in week 14, 15, 16 and see where we are.
I'm glad UT got their clunker out of the way this past weekend. Smooth sailing from here.
Shut up.
On that note, it's time for us to get our solemn faces on. It's time for In Memoriam. We remember a player, a team, a coach, whoever, whose sporting life was cut tragically short. Mike, who are you remembering this week?
Well, today, Alan, I'm remembering the NFL Pro Bowl. Did you hear they're replacing it? No more Pro Bowl.
Oh.
They're going to have now the Pro Bowl games, which basically is just a bunch of skills competitions. Most prominently, there's going to be a flag football game, which arguably that's what it was before.
Right.
But, it's a pretty significant shift. You know how long the Pro Bowl's been around?
How long?
First Pro Bowl game was played in 1951. So...
hate to see it.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Pro Bowl. You really won't be missed.
This week, I'm remembering Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, who just recently had this to say.
Yeah, well, I'm not, I'd like to think I'm not too much of a psychopath.
3 weeks later.
Oh, no. And that's his response to Buffalo not being able to get one more playoff in time before their eventual loss to the Miami Dolphins. As a quick aside, I can understand his frustration because the Bills, with about 9 seconds left to go, they couldn't get the ball spotted in time, couldn't get a snap off, couldn't down the ball, didn't really have a chance for a last-second field goal or Hail Mary, and they ultimately lose the game. But you know what? I understand his frustration, but he should be slightly frustrated more at the turnovers, the busted plays, Josh Allen trying to do too much and accomplishing too little. Josh Allen, by the way, had a chance to throw a chippy little shot into the corner of the end zone on their previous drive, and they end up ultimately turning it over on downs. On that play, the receiver's wide open inside the pylon, and what does he do? He bounces it to him about 3 yards short.
Yeah, I saw that.
Not exactly an MVP play, according to me. On that note, we're moving on to the picks. We're going to start with college football. The number 7 Kentucky Wildcats they're number 7, and yet they're 6.5-point underdogs at the number 14 Ole Miss Rebels. What do you think?
Well, so admittedly a little bit of a homer pick here. I'm from Kentucky, went to UK. Still, to me, that's a big number, even on the road. I think Kentucky's looked pretty good as I've watched them. They've got a legitimate pro prospect quarterback. They've got some good receivers. The defense is pretty solid. Offensive line and the running game is a little sketchy, but I don't know. I'm going to go with Kentucky to at least cover that number.
It's really tough because if you're the 7th ranked team in the country, even playing on the road against the 14th ranked team, 6.5 points. If you believe in the concept of home field gets you 3 points, if you're almost a touchdown underdog, then they're basically saying Ole Miss is a solidly better team despite being ranked that much lower. So are the rankings messed up or is the line messed up?
Right.
I mean, something doesn't add up there. I'm actually going to say Kentucky too. I think Kentucky with the points, and maybe not even with the points, maybe just on the money line. I think they're a way more physical team than Ole Miss is. Lane Kiffin, as much as I despise him, is a good coach who tends to reload quicker than most.
Right.
But Kentucky ran Florida out of the stadium just by physically being able to just put them on the ground.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they're going to do to Ole Miss. We're moving on to game 2. The number 9 ranked Oklahoma State Cowboys are going on the road to play the 16th ranked Baylor Bears. Oklahoma State also an underdog in this one. Another top 10 team going on the road as an underdog, but only 2.5 points. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a tough pick for me because I haven't actually seen either of these teams play. So, this is a better number at least. It's basically a pick 'em. If you go with the 3, then you're saying that Oklahoma State's actually a slight favorite, which is probably fair. I'm just basically pulling this out of there. I'm gonna go with the Cowboys.
I'm actually going to go with the Baylor Bears because Oklahoma State, year in and year out, this is what they do to you. They beat up on a few underhanded teams. They get a gaudy record with gaudy offensive stats, and then as soon as they go into conference play, they get routed by somebody. I'm not trying to say that I think Baylor's particularly great. I actually think that this is just more big conference bias. I don't think either of these teams are teams that deserve to be ranked particularly high.
Yeah.
So being ranked 9 and 16th as Big 12 teams, this is the same Big 12 that's about to collapse, remember?
Right.
The conference is literally disintegrating before our eyes. I have no faith in either of these teams. I'm just going to go with the whole team and pick Baylor. Number 10, NC State Wolfpack, who are also undefeated, 4-0. Number 10, NC State. They are the latest team that's going to get their crack at the ACC perennial champions, the Clemson Tigers, who are 5th in the nation now, coming off that double overtime win against Wake. It is at Clemson, but again, an undefeated number 10 team is a 7-point underdog to Clemson.
So you'll remember last week I went with Wake.
Yeah.
At least to cover, and I think they did. It's a good game. Big number. I'm still not sold on Clemson. I'm going to go with the Wolfpack to cover. Not necessarily on the money line to win, but I'm going to go with them to cover the 7.
This is a tough one. So this is another one of those where you wait each week. You're waiting for Clemson to finally wake up, shake off the rust, and start playing football.
Right.
At some point, you have to wonder, well, maybe they're just not as good.
This is what they are.
Their quarterback situation is a little bit spotty. I'm going to butcher the name. I think it's ukulele or something like that. I'm sorry. It's Trevor Lawrence's backup.
Ukulele.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's his name. It's whatever. I'm not explaining myself to you, Mahari. So, look, I think Dabo Swinney's a great coach, but I think that Clemson is starting to revert back to the mean. As much as they've had success in recent years, Clemson has not been a traditional powerhouse. Yeah. And even during their runs, they've been criticized for being, okay, so you're the best team in like the worst major conference in America.
Right.
So I know the NC State's right there. They are 4-0. I hate to see undefeated high-ranked teams be such big dogs. But I'm gonna double down and go with Clemson again. That this is finally the week that they make a statement that they actually belong ranked in the top 5th in the country.
Okay.
All right. Speaking of them, the number 22 Wake Forest Demon Deacons, heartbreaking home loss. They had it in the bag, Mahari. End up going to overtime. They lose it in double. They now are also 7-point underdogs, having just taken Clemson, the conference champion, to the wire. They now are 7-point underdogs at number 23, Florida State. Florida State? Yeah. Florida State is 4-0 and ranked 23rd.
Yeah, I think FSU, I think they're I think they're still a little overranked. I'm impressed with the turnaround that they've done down there because last year they were losing these games. Sure. But there's still some weaknesses there. Their O-line is still questionable. They got good running backs, not a lot to skill positions other than running backs. I mean, talking about wide receivers. And I still like Wake, so I think that's a big number. I'm gonna take the Demon Deacons to cover that.
I'm actually going to go with Florida State.
Ooh, look at you.
I'm not sold on Florida State either, and that is a big line, +7. Again, to the higher ranked team is the dog. However, it is at Florida State. They have put together a solid start to their season. I think the problem with Wake Forest is you're going to see a injured and deflated team coming off that loss to Clemson.
Well, there's that letdown.
It is, yeah, it's hard to get up and put that kind of effort in week and week out, especially after a heartbreaking conference loss against, let's face it, Clemson is the Goliath of the conference. So I think Florida State's going to sneak in here and take care of business. All right, we're going to have to do lightning round here. We're moving on to the NFL. Buffalo Bills coming off that loss to the Miami Dolphins, no longer so unbeatable. They are 4-point favorites on the road at the Baltimore Ravens, who have the same record as them, and they have the same shared loss, Miami Dolphins. If anything, the Baltimore Ravens really were blowing the Dolphins out of the water until they weren't, whereas the Bills actually were struggling with the Dolphins all day and ended up coming short. What do you think?
I like the Bills to bounce back.
Okay.
So I'm going to take the Bills.
So I'm going with the Bills as well, but I don't know if I necessarily paint it as a bounce back. I think it's just they were without like 4 defensive starters against the Dolphins. True. If they're healthier going into, although it was a very exhausting game down there in Miami, lots of hydration issues, lots of cramps. Yeah,
people just laying down.
I think the Bills do come back as well if they're healthy. So I'm going with the Bills on the knowledge that I believe they're getting their players back. If they're still having some injury and issues coming out of Miami, I mean, I think the Ravens are great. I think Lamar Jackson has done the right thing by quote unquote betting on himself this year. The only reason they're not doing better or performing better is that they've got other issues on that team than quarterback.
Right.
And finally, the Kansas City Chiefs, also a team that seemed nearly unbeatable a couple of weeks ago, suddenly losing an ugly game to, frankly, a bad team, Indianapolis Colts. They're now going on the road to play your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both of these teams coming off a loss. The Buccaneers are at home. The Chiefs are 2.5-point favorites. What do you think?
You know, this really depends. It all depends on who the Bucs can get back in the lineup. They played last week without their top 3 receivers. They're playing without one of their best offensive linemen. You get some of those guys back. Mike Evans should be back, so that'll help. You know, you get Julio Jones back in the lineup. You give Brady some weapons to throw to. The Bucs defense is still solid. Even they gave up the 2 early touchdowns to Green Bay, but then they locked them down. I like the Bucs if they get some of these guys back, but if they're going back out there again with a depleted wide receiver room and offensive line, then I would take the Chiefs. So I'm going to kind of do what you're doing with the Bills. I'm going to assume they're more healthy. I'm going to take the Bucs at home over the Chiefs.
I'm actually also going to go with the Buccaneers, and it's purely it's purely a spite pick. I have missed on like 3 NFL games this year in the sunken cost, and 2 of those 3 were Kansas City Chiefs.
Bastards.
They failed to cover one week and then just flat out lost the next. So I'm going with the Buccaneers. Screw you, Chiefs. Mike, do you have a final thought?
Well, you know, we were supposed to have our first preseason Lightning hockey game this week. It was going to be the Lightning versus the Hurricanes.
Oh, and now it's the Lightning versus the Hurricanes.
Yes, exactly. Apparently the Hurricanes have won. That game was canceled. So
damn.
Yeah.
1-0 Hurricanes. All right. We look forward to hockey season. The hockey season preview should be coming up soon, I think.
Whatever that is.
Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of SportsBall, and we will see you next week.
You have been listening to SportsBall with Mike Maharrey and Alan Mosley. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Odyssey, all at Alan Mosley TV. You can also subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting platforms. Just search for SportsBall with Mike and Alan. And you can find the weekly Sunken Cost Money Pit at Substack. Thanks for listening. We'll have more bread and circuses next week.